Hey, this is Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with another audiobook review. Once again, looking at another H.G. Wells book. As I was mentioned in my previous video covering War of the Worlds, we had as I was using Audible and I was going through all my Dune and Foundation, it started recommending me the H.G. Wells collection, and because I was subscribed to Audible through a link code that I got from WSTR Podcast, it was free. So this wasn't part of my monthly subscription, but this is just something that comes free to anybody who subscribes to Audible. They have a selection of free books, and of course they noticed I was into these classic sci-fi, so they thought you probably would like some H.G. Wells. And they also gave me some free Jules Verne, so I'll be covering that too after I get through these H.G. Wells books. But this one, The First Men on the Moon. And this one, Alexander Vlahos, probably saying that wrong, was the narrator. Very different from David Tennant, but also an excellent reader of this. I like the accents, the English accent there. And as I mentioned in the previous one, H.G. Wells was a studier of human behavior and examining that, but he was also an astute observer of science. And he had an amazing way of doing that, but I really think that some of what he thought would be true is so different than what actually is. So, and I just delight and love this audiobook, and this book in general by H.G. Wells, because of how outdated it is, yet at the same time how scientifically observant it is. How at his day this was probably considered scientifically accurate, despite that. But his description of the moon, thinking that there was going to be a weak atmosphere on the moon, but the concept of basically invented flubber, the lighter than air thing, that substance that or material that could basically block out gravity. So you have stuff that blocks out light, you can have stuff that blocks out radiation, all these different things. So why can't we make a material that can block out gravity, and that would allow you to float? And by opening windows and exposing yourself to gravity in this sphere, you could be sent this way or that way, pulling to whatever celestial body you're opening the gravity up to. Very interesting concept, very sci-fi. This is when I talk about H.G. Wells being like what Star Trek might be like when we go actually in the future, when mankind is traveling the stars. They're probably going to look at Star Trek and just look at how silly the concepts of dilithium and warp core and all that, silliness that's going to appear to those people. But today, we go, oh yeah, warp bubble fields theory. Like, these are theories that scientists have. Well, these were all theories about the moon that he's very scientific about his descriptions. He talks about like being decompressurized out of the thing and needing to be like a bell divers and different things because the moon would have different atmosphere. The weightlessness in space would cause your body's metabolism to slow and not need to eat. Was an interesting detail that he went into great detail about. But that's what I love about H.G. Wells, is he goes into that detail that even though I'm in a year where I know all of this to be completely false, scientifically inaccurate, the level that he describes it gets me to believe it. and he's landing on the moon, and they're eating leeks that make them hallucinate and start mocking Moonies and get captured by Moonies, the moon people, and taken underground where the moon is full of gold, and at the center of the moon is a giant ocean. And really, really great. The Moonies were a very interesting concept. Moon-like people. Basically, humans would have Superman-like powers, because on the moon we'd have so much less gravity. Interesting concepts. But I think one of the things I liked best was the difference between the person who was just about the scientific discovery versus the person who's the entrepreneur. And then at the end versus the Mooney Queen, who trying to understand the concepts of humanity. We live on the surface, but we used to live in caves, which caves are superior than building structures on the ground that get affected by weather and storms. Why wouldn't we be underground where it's safer? We've never tapped our core of our planet like they have. Why are we flying off to another planet? And why do we war with each other? That's a concept they can't quite grasp, and makes them fearful of mankind, and rightfully so. It was a way for H.G. Wells to comment on something that, from his perspective, was very petty at the time. The way men war with one another. The same with War of the Worlds. Really showing how humans have a common plight and how soon we can be wiped out, and how petty the things that we strive over. And that's kind of a running thread in a lot of his books. I definitely look forward to getting to The Time Machine. I remember that having a lot to do with that too. So anyways, this was a wonderful book. On that, Salty Nerd Podcast, Bat Rat Spider Crab, the retro We Watch episode. They did another one, and they did Robinson Crusoe on Mars. And what I found funny is they pointed out how on the box that it said scientifically accurate. Some of the things from that movie are in this book. And so while this is going to the moon, and that's supposed to be an adaptation of like Robinson Crusoe in space, kind of like Lost in Space is Swiss Family Robinson, this book, that movie, takes a lot of inspiration from this book. And so I find it funny that even back then in like the 60s, they still felt that this was somewhat scientifically accurate. That's how much of an impact. And it's shocking that it's not been that long since we've understood what we know about the moon and space and those different things. So that just kind of is a mind-boggling thing, and it makes you think, like, in 100 years, what are we going to think about Star Trek, Stargate, these different sci-fi shows that try their best to give some educated guess about theories of that. And of course, I always like ones that tell deep stories that do have a social message. But once again, right now we're dealing with a thing in Hollywood where the message is kind of first and foremost, and the story's in the background, and they kind of stop the show and tell you the message. H.G. Wells writes an amazing tale, and you realize, wow, the fact that people are warm with it, like, that is, when you're thinking about it from an alien's perspective, like, that is just dumb. That is dumb. Why are we doing that? Why? This makes no sense. And how that would be viewed by an outside viewer. Amazing, impactful messaging. And that's the beauty of what sci-fi can do. And H.G. Wells, he can be a bit dark, and he can be a bit lengthy if you're not into sci-fi. He really goes into detail. But he has a tremendous ability to impact you with the story. And that's something that I think anybody who's going to write science fiction today, they need to be reading these publications first. They need to consume H.G. Wells, consume Jules Verne, consume Asimov. These, to me, should be required reading so that they can understand how to do this messaging through sci-fi. Well, what did you think of this book? Let me know down in the comments below, and what's your favorite H.G. Wells book? I'd like to know. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video.